Hey everybody, how's it going? Josh here, and today I thought we would talk about a fan favorite and pretty creative theory that's been going on, which is the Doctor Strange time loop theory. So in Doctor Strange, actually one of the most famous scenes probably from the movie was the time loop used against Dormammu in the whole bargaining scene. And actually it was really crazy because it was the first time I really got to see an Infinity Stone used on such a scale. You know, we've seen Infinity Stones like in the flashback with the Power Stone. It was used to destroy a whole planet, seemingly. We obviously got to see little bits and pieces of the Reality Stone, even though that was seemingly very much so nerfed, even though Malekith was supposed to be so adept at using it. At the same time, the Space Stone, which kind of just did what the Space Stone does in some ways. I mean, for the most part, all the stones kind of did their own thing, relating to their aspect, but the Time Stone definitely did it on probably the most OP scale, with regards to literally freezing time, reversing time, fast forwarding time, and introducing the concept of time to Dormammu's universe that didn't have time beforehand. And it was revealed that Kevin Feige, actually kind of the mastermind of the MCU, was the person to introduce the idea of Doctor Strange kind of, I guess, inducing time on Dormammu, if you will, according to one of the writers of Doctor Strange who recently did an interview where he kind of talked about it. And from that information from Kevin Feige, who seemingly wanted to use it to institute that type of concept for maybe a future use in the MCU, but according to the writer, once Kevin Feige gave him that kind of, I guess, information of what he wanted Doctor Strange to do with the Time Stone in that moment, the rest was kind of history. The writer did the bargaining and all that stuff with regards to putting it in the film. Now, this was a pretty cool idea because obviously it's been feeding this Avengers Endgame kind of Doctor Strange's time loop theory ever since then, even though obviously one of the biggest, I guess you could say, not errors, but one of the biggest vacancies, biggest plot holes of that kind of plan is the fact that Doctor Strange died. So if Doctor Strange actually died when Thanos snapped his fingers, why did the time loop not kick in and everything repeat itself? And obviously most people are saying it's because he didn't actually die. He instead got transported, very dramatically though, but transported to the soul world. And another kind of thing that I noticed also was upon multiple viewings of the futures and all that stuff, he decides Tony's life is worth saving over his oath to the Time Stone. And this kind of caught me off guard a little bit because he seemed pretty certain that this oath was something he couldn't break, as if it was a magical oath of sorts. So it's unlikely he would be able to betray the oath unless doing this action of, I guess, sacrificing the stone for Tony was, at the end of the day, actually saving the stone after all. Now, when Thanos was given the Time Stone by Doctor Strange, another thing I thought was kind of interesting was that the Time Stone had a loop around it. And that was interesting because out of all the stones, the only one Thanos doesn't actually directly touch is technically the Time Stone. He has to grab it by its little, I guess, loop field, if you will, and then put it on the Infinity Gauntlet. But that just kind of stuck out to me because I'm like, what makes the Time Stone so unique that even when it's not in use, it has this time loop over it? So it seems unlikely that Doctor Strange would give up the stone without any tricks, and it's worth noting that Thanos specifically mentions Doctor Strange not using any tricks, which maybe was foreshadowing of some kind, who knows. But when he says earlier the stone might be their best chance to beat Thanos, that came from Doctor Strange, and Iron Man mentioned it too, but Doctor Strange did in the Sanctum acknowledge that, which makes me think that he was thinking the whole time, how can I use this stone against Thanos without losing the stone? And then eventually he probably just came to, once he saw the futures, I have to save Tony, thus I have to give up the stone, but I'll at least do this little thing in giving up the stone. And that's why I said it was interesting that Doctor Strange, when giving the stone to Thanos, doesn't actually touch the stone, in the same way where Thanos never actually gets to put his fingers on the stone. And when you look back throughout Infinity War, he touches every single stone. The Space Stone, while it's in the Tesseract, it usually burned through a lot of people's hands. It usually burned through a lot of metal that the stone was placed in, I guess, direct contact with. Thanos touched it, no issues. The Reality Stone touched it, no issues. The Power Stone, we didn't get to see that battle of Xandar, how he got it, but presumably he had no issues gathering the Power Stone as it was the first one he put in the gauntlet. And the list kind of goes on and on and on, same with the Mind Stone, but the Time Stone was the one he never actually touched, which just seems really odd to me, and a little too intentional, if you will, considering they had to specifically animate Thanos touching every single stone but the time stone that supposedly also happened to have a loop around it, when it had no loop around it any other scene it was in. Now, something I don't think we actually talked about is the fact that in Doctor Strange, obviously the loop was bound to Doctor Strange's life, but is it possible that Doctor Strange actually bound the time stone's loop instead of being to his life? Maybe it's bound to Tony Stark's life. I think that'd be a really interesting failsafe, if you will, that if Thanos went against his word, which we know he has in some ways before going to Eitri in Nevdalir, but it'd be really interesting if maybe a failsafe is that if Tony dies, everything gets restarted. And maybe something that happens in Endgame is that Tony actually makes the sacrifice, but in making the sacrifice, everything gets reversed. I think that'd be really interesting. It wouldn't stop Thanos, obviously, from assembling the gauntlet, probably, but it'd still be a really interesting plot twist, I think, since most people are expecting Doctor Strange to be the one likely to be bound by the loop. Now, another possibility is that the time loop will be used to allow people to remember their experiences of the snap, such as Tony, like I said before. Maybe upon Tony sacrificing himself at some point in the movie, everything goes back. And from there, maybe everyone within a certain sphere of the time loop will remember everything, and that in itself will start a new status quo. So in essence, Spider-Man, for example, didn't die, yet he'll probably still remember that he died. But since everything got reversed, he no longer officially died. But he might still have those kind of mental strains of experiencing that. In the same way where Kevin Feige said Doctor Strange died so many times against Dormammu, and he was able to use those various deaths and I guess resurrections as a result to try to train himself, work on his magic even more and more and more, eventually until he finally got the bargain with Dormammu to actually go through. But comment below your guys' thoughts. What do you guys think about this Doctor Strange time loop theory? I've been seeing it around everywhere, so I thought we'd finally talk about it here on the channel. Comment below your guys' thoughts, and we'll see you guys later.